This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow.
Hey, cannabis operators, got a couple questions for you. Are your SOPs tied directly to your cultivation plans? Can you easily manage your inventory and workforce and vendors from a single system? Can you manage compliance across multiple licenses and states? Do you have performance analytics to help you maximize your 24-month cultivation and manufacturing plans? If this is not the case, Regrow is there to help. They can help you maximize your yields and consistency. Think of Regrow as the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain. They're available globally with native localization and foreign language support. So if you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you? Excuse me.
I want to first congratulate you on winning South Carolina. That was huge. So congratulations on that. And I'm really particularly interested, before we get into the States Reform Act, is, why you're so passionate about cannabis. I see you tweeting about it. I think that I've read that, you had a personal relationship with the plant. So why don't you talk to us about your background and kind of what's brought you to being a big proponent within the Republican base for cannabis?
Well, it's an issue that I've worked on for a number of years since before I came to Congress. I'm now in my first term as a member of Congress, but I worked on this issue as a state lawmaker. And the state of South Carolina, particularly State Senator Tom Davis, has been trying to get medical cannabis in the state of South Carolina for the better part of 7 years. And just recently, on a technicality, they weren't able to pass it. It passed out of the Senate, and they weren't able to pass it out of the State House there. But it is an issue for me personally. I come from a long line of veterans. I know that PTSD is a huge issue for our veteran community, but also for myself personally, I was raped when I was 16, and I had a real struggle for a period of time, and my doctor prescribed antidepressants. And when I was prescribed antidepressants, it actually made me feel like my depression was worsened by it. I stopped taking it, and I self-medicated with cannabis, not realizing really what I was doing at a young age, but it saved my life, as it has for many, many people out there. And when you study it and you look at it from particularly a medical perspective, what it does in reducing the rate of opioid addiction, reducing the rate of deaths by drug abuse and opioid abuse, morbidity, for example, it's upwards of close to 20% in most states where you just have one dispensary. And then not to mention the business and economic and jobs opportunities. We're facing an enormous crisis with inflation, with gas prices, with jobs in the economy. And this is a job creator. And we want business to be able to operate like any other legal business. That means banking, that means stock exchange, that means being able to write off business expenses on your taxes. So when you look at it from a jobs and economic perspective, it is a win for everybody in this country as well. And so I'm really excited about the bill. It's one of the best pieces of legislation I have ever worked on. And guess what? I just won my primary a week ago, and they tried to use cannabis against me in a very conservative Republican primary, and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because the vast majority of Americans on either side of the aisle, conservative or progressive, they support cannabis, smart cannabis reform, responsible cannabis reform with guardrails for our kids, guardrails for our veterans, job protection, job creation. Those are the things that our country was founded on, and those are the things that people support regardless of their political affiliation.
Yeah, I gotta say, it is a breath of fresh air to hear a common sense lawmaker, elected official talk about these issues in such a, you obviously understand it, but you also see the potential, which is amazing. And so my next question to you, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the States Reform Act, like, what is the level of cannabis understanding among the Republican base? I mean, you talked about all the benefits, job creation, medicinal benefits. Why is there a hesitancy among the majority, and what is the action to kind of get them across the line?
The only hesitancy we see is right here in Washington, D.C. There's no hesitancy with the American people. It's a 70-30 issue. In my particular district, medical is 70 to 80% support amongst Republicans and Democrats alike. Recreational and adult use in my district is supported by the vast majority of constituents in my district by 55 to 60%. And so what I have told Republicans, in particular elected Republicans, is this is not controversial. You actually, I've encouraged people to actually poll the issue and see where their base is on it. And whether you're progressive or you're Freedom Caucus, type of person or voter, like the vast majority of people support it. I've polled the issue extensively, both for Republican primary voters and general election voters. And I only pulled it after I did the bill. I didn't do it before. Usually, I did it the opposite way, which was kind of a risk, but I'm just so passionate about the issue personally, professionally. I know how much good is in it, particularly when you're talking about, our veterans and you're talking about people who are sick. My mother is sick right now, and this was after my bill was done, but I'm furious that in the state of South Carolina, I can't get her something that will help protect her, help save her life, and give her a higher quality of life as she ages than other states where you can get it legally. And so it's that personal relationship that I bring to the table, but also I'm telling Republicans, pull the hell out of it. Go see where people are and understand this is not controversial. And oh, by the way, I just won a really contentious Republican primary where they tried to use the issue against me, and we won by almost 10 points.
Right.
So, it is not as controversial as people realize. And a lot has changed in the last decade or even 2 decades. People have really come around, particularly those as they age. And I've been to some dispensaries around the country, and you'll see they're young and old, they're white and black, they're conservative and progressive. I mean, everybody pretty much supports it, except for people that don't understand it and understand its value. And then when you educate those people on its value economically and health-wise, then they're much more likely to support it, which is why we're getting tremendous support for the States Reform Act. It's not a federal legalization bill, but it is a bill that supports the rights of states to do whatever the hell they want.
Right.
And by the way, you have 47 to 50 states that either have CBD, hemp, or medical or adult use. And some states have implemented it better than others. But we have specific guardrails in there to help in the implementation of states that do legalize it, to ensure that we protect our kids, to ensure that we protect our veterans, to ensure that people aren't discriminated at work who are qualified to do certain jobs. I mean, we have really specific responsible guardrails in there for those that do legalize it and their right to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're so right when you talk about, the public support is out there. And when you tell your constituents, I mean, your peers within the House, you're saying, hey, pull the hell out of it, check it out, because this is something that we should lean in on. And, the industry is talking about it. It's a bipartisan issue. It's really, and I've said, it's whichever party kind of moves on it first, they're gonna pull a whole majority in. And not only that, like the Democrats have already presented their bill, and I got to tell you, it doesn't stack up to the States Reform Act. I mean,
it's not going to work, and it's not going to get
so high, right? It's crazy. Yeah,
it's not going to work. And they keep putting the same bills out there because it's not working. And, one of my issues is we've got the safe banking bill, and if Republicans are the majority, I imagine we'll do that. But then what else are we going to do? That's not nearly enough right now. And then you've got the left, the progressive, that say, well, it doesn't go far enough for social equity and other things. And it's like, here's this bill. It's right in the middle. It's conservative because it's allowing states to do whatever they want, but at the same time, puts guardrails in there for states that have legalized it to say, hey, don't sell to kids, don't market to kids, don't advertise to kids, protect our veterans, allow them to have it get prescribed at any VA center across the country, allow states to do social equity, because there are some states, like I know in South Carolina, they're going to have a different perspective than say New York or Massachusetts or Connecticut, for example. Right. So giving states the freedom, which is a conservative ideology, right? Federalism is a conservative principle, but taking that conservative principle and applying it here, like we would apply it to any other particular issue that we care about, we should apply states' rights and federalism equally across the board to every issue, particularly the most controversial ones. But I don't see it as controversial at all in some circles, which is why I tell my party and people in my party, go poll it, go talk to your constituents about it. And people are, by and large, the vast majority of people are very supportive. And I liken it to my two parents. They're 80 and 82. My father is a veteran. When I did the bill, he's like, I'm not sure I'm keen on the idea of this, but I'm like, hey, Dad, use CBD oil for your back pain. So you can't say you're against it. And then my mom, who's 80 and said to me at the time, she said, hey, if I ever get sick, send me the best stuff. Well, my mom got sick about 2 months ago, and it's lifelong debilitating. health issues, multiple health issues, that it could help. And now she doesn't have the right to get it legally to help her. And it's unfortunate and it makes me really angry, but that's how far we've come as a country with our population, young and old, right and left, that pretty much everybody supports it.
Right. No, I totally agree. And I mean, even in my experience, right, seen so many friends that have gotten addicted to opioids or gone a different path, benzodiazepines for depression, where this stuff is to manage. And I mean, of course, cannabis is not an end all solution, but it doesn't have the addictive properties. It doesn't have the stuff that, is harmful and long-term that these other prescriptions do. So it's just great that you're doing this. My next question for you is, who's lobbying against the cannabis reform initiative?
It's hard to say. It's been kind of quiet. You even have some people in the cannabis industry that don't want this to happen, ironically. And very, very, very small, because they don't want the competition, right? When you have a monopoly on the market, you don't want the competition. But there are members of Congress who say they're pro-cannabis, and yet they're not on the bill. And you have to ask yourself why they're not on the bill, which is a good question. And so that's my question to everybody is, if you're pro-cannabis, this is literally the best cannabis bill we have in Congress today, I think ever. Of course, there's pride of authorship here, but it's both sides. I mean, it's got something for everybody in this thing. It's not controversial. It's federalism driven, states' rights driven, it's science driven. And why aren't you on the bill? Why aren't you supporting the bill? And so the answers you hear pretty much are BS as well. So if you're really for it, you should be on this thing. And if you're not on it yet, you should go poll it and see that, it's not going to hurt you and actually may help you in the election cycle. But so that's been our message, is educating members on it, what it is and what it isn't, and why it's responsible legislation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard you say that it would save the federal government, $600 million over the next 5 years. And, but yeah, it still seems like it's controversial in DC, but not,
not anywhere else.
Anywhere else,
not
right.
Anywhere else. Yeah,
right.
I'm trying to bring common sense to Congress, which is a rare thing these days.
Yep. Well, last two more questions. One is the potential for industrial hemp. So we've talked about the medicinal benefits. We've talked about everything that we're kind of seeing right now in real time play out with the evolution of the industry. But when we think about industrial hemp and all the material applications that it has, I mean, does that get brought up at all? Are we
occasionally, and we have provisions for hemp in the bill as well. But again, that's one of those places where when you start educating people on what hemp is and what it can do and its industrial properties and what benefits there are, it's a why not? Why are you not a part of this thing? Why are you not supporting it? But we are seeing that's a place where people are starting. They start there at hemp, then they get to CBD, and then they get to medical, and they, so on and so forth. But it's a great industry. And one that we should be supporting by and large across the country.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure is lacking there, but just think about all the different things that you can produce. It's amazing. Well, to wrap up, Congresswoman, it is just, where are we at with the state's reform bill? What are your plans for the future to kind of advance this thing forward? Like, what's the plan at this point?
Well, the next step we hope will be a hearing, which we've been promised. And so we're working through dates for that and pushing the ball forward. We only have 23 legislative days yet for the year. We're in session in July. We're in session this week. We're in session in September. We don't come up here in August or October. So really we're facing the end of year right now. And so we're trying to get that hearing date on the calendar very soon. And that'll be the next step for us. And then after that, depending on where that goes, is getting with leadership, because I do believe that Republicans will be in a majority in November, and figuring out where is the leadership on this bill? What can we do? What part of it do they agree with? What part do they not? Where do we need to massage it to make it better, to get more broad support within the conference? That's what we'll be working on in the fall.
That's great. Yeah. Again, it's very enlightening to see elected officials with the level of understanding and the potential of this industry and this plant, and keep blazing the trails, because it's great to see this as opposed to Schumer repetitive tweets about how they're thinking about social equity and the war on drugs.
You're never going to get Republican support. That's the thing. You've got to make sure that you find that agreement, you find that central place to go, and they're not willing to do that. And that's why they're not going to get Republican support on their legislation. The taxes are too high. Leaving social equity up to the federal government is not a winning solution. Leave it up to the states so that you can get broad bipartisan support and low taxes, and you got a deal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the people aren't fooled either. I mean, with 15 to 20% taxation and you're talking social equity, I mean, this is a highly capitalized industry. It's hard to get in, right?
When
So
inflation's at 9%, you can't afford to do that.
absolutely. Well, is there anything else, Congresswoman, that you wanted to leave the audience with before we
No, that's it.
go here? Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and keep blazing the trails.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.